Welcome to the ultimate guide to learning English through stories. Do you want to learn English in the easiest way possible? What if I told you that you can learn naturally, just like a child, by listening to an exciting story? Stay with us until the end, because this story will not only teach you English, but also surprise you with an unforgettable lesson. Chapter 1: A New Beginning. Imagine waking up in a new country where no one speaks your language. How would you feel? Excited? Nervous? Or completely lost? Today, we follow Mark's journey as he takes his first step into a world where English is everywhere. Can he survive his first day? Stay until the end to find out. Mark stepped off the plane and took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the cool morning air of New York City. He had dreamed about this moment for years, imagining himself walking the streets, speaking perfect English, and making new friends. But now that he was finally here, reality felt very different. The city was louder, faster, and bigger than he had expected. People walked quickly, speaking English so fast that he couldn't catch a single word. As he made his way through the airport, he knew he had to start using English immediately. He needed to find a taxi to his new apartment, but the thought of speaking to a stranger in English made his stomach twist. He repeated the phrase in his mind, "Excuse me, where can I find a taxi?" But as he approached an airport worker, the words disappeared. Taxi," he finally managed to say, his voice shaky. The worker nodded and pointed toward the exit. Mark let out a sigh of relief. That was close. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Outside, Mark spotted a long line of yellow taxis and nervously approached one. The driver, a man with sunglasses and a thick Brooklyn accent, looked at him impatiently. "Where to?" the driver asked. Mark's mind went blank. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a piece of paper, and handed it to the driver. The address of his new apartment was written on it. The driver nodded, started the car, and pulled onto the busy streets of New York. As they drove, Mark stared out the window, mesmerized by the towering skyscrapers and flashing billboards. The city felt alive, full of energy, full of possibilities. But at the same time, he felt small and helpless. He had studied English for years in school, but now when he needed it the most, it felt useless. The taxi stopped in front of a tall, red brick building. Mark handed the driver some money, hoping it was enough. The driver gave him change, but Mark had no idea if it was correct. He just nodded, took his suitcase, and stepped onto the sidewalk. Standing in front of the building, he realized another challenge awaited him: checking in. His new apartment was an Airbnb, and he had to talk to the receptionist to get the keys. He took a deep breath, walked inside, and approached the front desk. A friendly woman greeted him with a smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" she asked cheerfully. Mark opened his mouth to speak, but once again, the words refused to come out. His heart pounded. He had practiced this moment 100 times, yet his mind was completely blank. The receptionist looked at him, waiting patiently. Mark panicked. He quickly pulled out his phone and showed her the Airbnb confirmation email. "Ah. You're staying in apartment 3B, she said, handing him the keys. "Welcome to New York." Mark sighed in relief again. He had survived another conversation, but just barely. When he entered the apartment, he dropped his suitcase on the floor and collapsed onto the couch. He felt exhausted, not from traveling, but from struggling with English. He had always thought he was good at the language, but now he wasn't so sure. How am I supposed to live here if I can't even speak? He wondered. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his English tutor Lucy, whom he had met online before moving. Lucy, hey Mark. Welcome to NYC. How was your first day? Mark stared at the message for a moment. He wanted to reply, it was great, but that wasn't the truth. He started typing. Mark, it was difficult. People speak so fast. I feel nervous to talk. A few moments later, Lucy replied. Lucy, that's totally normal. The beginning is always the hardest. But trust me, in a few weeks, you'll feel more confident. Just take small steps every day. Mark read her message twice and smiled. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was just the beginning of something great. Before going to bed, he looked at himself in the mirror and whispered, tomorrow I will try again. Have you ever felt nervous speaking English? Tell us your experience in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more amazing stories. Stay with us for the next chapter, The Challenge. Chapter 2, The Challenge. What if you had to speak English for 24 hours? No exceptions. Could you do it? Mark is about to take on a challenge that will change everything. Will he succeed, or will he fail? Stay until the end to find out. The morning sun streamed through the window as Mark woke up in his new apartment. He stretched, rubbed his eyes, and took a deep breath. Today will be better, he told himself. But deep inside, he still felt anxious. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from Lucy. Lucy, good morning, Mark. Are you ready for your first big challenge? Mark frowned. Challenge? He had completely forgotten about it. Before moving to New York, Lucy had promised to help him improve his English. Now, she was about to make sure he didn't escape. Mark, what challenge? A few seconds later, her reply appeared. Lucy, you have to speak only in English today. No Spanish. No translating. Just English. Are you in? Mark stared at the message, hesitating. Speaking English all day? No way. He could already imagine the awkward situations, the moments of silence, the words stuck in his throat. But then he remembered why he came to New York in the first place, to learn. He took a deep breath and typed back. Mark, okay. I'll try. Lucy, no trying, just doing. Let's go. Mark's first test came immediately. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since arriving. He grabbed his phone and searched for a nearby cafe. There was one just a few blocks away. Perfect, he thought. Walking through the streets of New York, he felt a mix of excitement and fear. The city was alive with sounds, car horns, people talking, music from street performers. But in his mind, there was only one thought. What if I say something wrong? He reached the cafe, stepped inside, and took a deep breath. The smell of coffee and fresh pastries filled the air. He walked up to the counter, where a barista with a bright smile greeted him. Good morning. What can I get for you? She asked. Mark's heart started pounding. He knew what he wanted, but his mind was racing. How do I say it correctly? What if she doesn't understand me? I want a coffee, he finally said, his voice shaky. The barista nodded. Sure. What kind of coffee? Mark hesitated. He hadn't thought about that. In Spain, coffee was just café, but in America, there were so many options: espresso, latte, cappuccino, americano. His brain went blank. Normal coffee, he said, hoping she understood. The barista smiled. You mean black coffee? Yes. Black coffee, Mark repeated, feeling relieved. Great. Small, medium, or large? Mark panicked again. Why are there so many choices? Medium, he blurted out, not really sure if that's what he wanted. Anything else? Mark quickly shook his head. No, just coffee. All right. That'll be $3.50. Mark fumbled with his wallet, handed over the money, and grabbed his coffee. He took a deep breath and walked to a table. I did it, he thought, smiling to himself. It wasn't perfect, but he had spoken English, and that was a victory. Later that afternoon, Lucy invited Mark to a bookstore to continue the challenge. Okay, Mark, she said, handing him a small notebook. You have to ask a stranger for help finding a book. No Spanish. No fear. Just English. Mark's eyes widened. A stranger? Are you serious? Lucy laughed. Of course. That's how you learn. Come on, you got this. Mark sighed, looked around, and spotted an older woman browsing the shelves. His heart pounded. I can't do this. But then he remembered his promise, to stop hesitating and just try. He walked up to her, cleared his throat and said, Excuse me, do you know where, the English books are? The woman smiled warmly. Oh yes. They're right over there. Mark followed her pointing finger and nodded. Thank you. As he walked back to Lucy, he felt his confidence grow. You did it. Lucy cheered. See? Talking to people isn't so scary. Mark grinned. Maybe this challenge wasn't so impossible after all. Chapter 3. The Funny Mistakes. Have you ever said something in English that made people laugh? What if your mistake changed the entire meaning of what you wanted to say? Today, Mark experiences some of the funniest English mistakes of his life. Stay until the end and share your funniest mistake in the comments. Mark was feeling more confident after his 24-hour English challenge. He wasn't fluent yet, but he was proud of himself for pushing through. His conversations were still slow and full of pauses, but at least he was trying. That morning, Lucy invited him to meet some of her friends at a cafe. It's time for you to practice real conversations, she told him. No scripts, no preparation, just natural English. Mark was nervous, but he agreed. He wanted to improve, and the only way to do that was by speaking more. When he arrived at the cafe, Lucy introduced him to her two friends, Emily and Jake. Hey Mark. Nice to meet you, Emily said with a friendly smile. Hi. Welcome to New York, Jake added. Mark smiled and nodded. Nice to meet you too. Everything was going well until Emily asked, So Mark, how do you like New York so far? Mark wanted to say, I'm very excited to be here, but he got confused with words. Instead, he confidently said, I'm very exciting to be here. Lucy's friends looked at him for a second, then burst into laughter. Mark's face turned red. What? What did I say? Lucy giggled. You said, I'm exciting. That means you are a very fun and interesting person. Mark's eyes widened. Oh no. I meant, I am excited. Emily laughed. Don't worry, it happens all the time. A few minutes later, the conversation continued, and Mark wanted to ask about good places to eat in New York. He looked at Jake and confidently asked, Where can I eat a good restaurant? Jake raised an eyebrow. You want to eat a restaurant? Mark's eyes widened again. Oh no. I mean, where can I eat at a good restaurant? Everyone laughed again, including Mark. English is crazy, he said, shaking his head. Lucy smiled. Yes, but you're learning fast. Mistakes are the best teachers. Later that day, Mark decided to go shopping. He walked into a clothing store and found a nice jacket. He wanted to ask the shop assistant if he could try it on. He thought for a moment and confidently said, "Can I prove this jacket?" The assistant looked confused. "Prove it? Prove what?" Mark realized something was wrong. Lucy had taught him the word prove before, but now it didn't make sense. He quickly checked his phone and saw the correct phrase. "Can I try on this jacket?" "Oh. Sorry, I mean try on." Mark corrected himself, laughing. The assistant chuckled. "No problem. That was a good mistake." That night, Mark was feeling proud of himself. Yes, he had made mistakes, but every mistake taught him something new. He called Lucy to tell her about his day. "Lucy, I made so many mistakes today," he said. "But you know what? I don't care anymore." Lucy laughed. "That's the spirit. Mistakes mean progress." Mark thought for a moment and smiled. "I guess I am exciting after all," he joked. They both laughed. Have you ever made a funny mistake in English? Share your story in the comments. Chapter 4: The Big Test. What happens when you step out of your comfort zone? Today, Mark faces his biggest challenge yet, a real conversation with native speakers. Will he succeed, or will fear hold him back? Stay until the end to see if he passes the test. The sun was setting over New York City, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Mark sat nervously at a cafe, sipping his coffee, waiting for Lucy. She had told him that today would be special. A few minutes later, Lucy arrived with a big smile on her face. "Mark, are you ready for the big test?" she asked excitedly. Mark's stomach twisted. "What test?" Lucy grinned. "We're going to a party, with native English speakers." Mark nearly dropped his coffee. "What? A party? With real Americans?" Lucy laughed. "Yes. You've been practicing for weeks, and now it's time to use everything you've learned." Mark shook his head. "I don't know, Lucy. What if I don't understand anything?" Lucy placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You will. And even if you don't, just keep going. The secret is to relax, listen, and enjoy the moment." Mark took a deep breath. He knew this was his chance to prove to himself that he could do it. "Okay. Let's go." When they arrived at the party, the atmosphere was lively. People were laughing, talking, and enjoying themselves. Music played softly in the background, and the smell of delicious food filled the air. Mark felt like he had stepped into another world. He wanted to turn around and leave, but Lucy gave him a little push forward. "Come on. Let's meet some people." The first person they met was a tall guy with glasses and a friendly smile. "Hey, I'm Tom," he said, extending his hand. Mark shook his hand nervously. "Hi, I am Mark. Nice to meet you." Tom smiled. "Nice to meet you too. So where are you from?" Mark hesitated for a second, then answered, "I am from Spain." "That's awesome. How long have you been in New York?" Mark felt his brain working hard. He wanted to say, "I have been here for 2 weeks," but he wasn't sure if that was correct. He decided to try anyway. "I am here since 2 weeks," he said, feeling unsure. Tom nodded, but looked a little confused. Lucy quickly jumped in. "Oh, you mean I've been here for 2 weeks?" Mark slapped his forehead. "Ah, yes, that's what I meant." Tom laughed. "Hey, no worries. Your English is great." Mark smiled, feeling a little more relaxed. As the night went on, Mark found himself having more conversations. He met Emily, who was a photographer, and Jake, who worked in marketing. "So Mark," Emily said, "what do you do?" Mark took a deep breath and answered, "I work in digital marketing." "That's cool. Do you like it?" Mark thought for a moment. He wanted to say yes, but sometimes it is difficult, but he wasn't sure about the grammar. He decided to just go for it. "Yes, but sometimes is difficult." Emily smiled. "Oh, you just need to add it. You can say yes, but sometimes it is difficult." Mark laughed. "Ah, I forgot it. Thank you." "You're doing amazing," Jake said. "Most people are too scared to even try." Mark felt a wave of confidence. He was speaking, making mistakes, and learning, all at the same time. At one point, Lucy called everyone to play a game. "Okay, we're going to play 20 questions. Someone thinks of a word, and everyone asks yes/no questions to guess it." Mark felt nervous. He had never played a game in English before. But he decided to try. "Mark, you go first," Lucy said. He thought for a moment, then chose the word apple. Jake asked, "Is it a thing?" "Yes," Mark said. Emily asked, "Can you eat it?" "Yes." Tom asked, "Is it sweet?" Mark smiled. "Yes." Jake guessed, "Is it an apple?" "Yes." "You win." Mark laughed. Everyone cheered. "Mark, you're really getting better," Lucy said. Mark couldn't believe it. A few weeks ago, he had been too scared to speak. Now he was playing games and making friends, all in English. As the party ended, Lucy turned to Mark. "So, how do you feel?" Mark took a deep breath and smiled. "I feel proud. I still make mistakes, but I'm not afraid anymore." Lucy beamed. "That's the secret to learning. Keep going, and you'll be fluent before you know it." Mark walked home that night feeling like a new person. He had faced his fear, spoken English, and even made new friends. This wasn't just a test. It was the beginning of something big. Chapter 5. The Transformation, Memorable Ending. Can one decision change your entire life? Mark's journey proves that it can. From struggling with English to speaking confidently, he has come a long way. But what happens when he faces his final challenge? Stay until the end to witness his incredible transformation. 1 year had passed since Mark first arrived in New York City. It felt like a lifetime ago, back when he was too scared to order a coffee, too nervous to ask for directions, and too shy to have real conversations. Now, everything was different. Mark walked confidently through the streets, greeting people with a smile, chatting with baristas, and even joking with taxi drivers. English no longer felt like a foreign language, it felt like a part of him. But today was special. Today, he would do something he never imagined possible, a public speech in English. It all started when Lucy invited him to speak at an event for English learners. "Mark, you have to tell your story," she had said. "You are living proof that anyone can learn English with the right mindset." At first, Mark hesitated. The idea of standing in front of an audience, speaking in English, terrified him. But then he remembered his journey, the fear, the mistakes, the victories. "I'll do it," he said, surprising even himself. Now, standing backstage, Mark could hear the audience murmuring. His heart pounded, his hands were sweaty, but he took a deep breath and reminded himself why he was here. Lucy introduced him. "Please welcome Mark, who will share his incredible journey with all of you." The audience clapped as Mark stepped onto the stage. He took a deep breath, looked at the sea of faces, and began. "1 year ago, I arrived in New York, and I was terrified. The room went silent, everyone listening intently. I couldn't even order a coffee without panicking. Every conversation felt like a test, and I was always afraid of making mistakes." A few people nodded in agreement, understanding his struggle. "But then I realized something important. Fear doesn't help you learn, mistakes do. The more I failed, the more I improved. The more I tried, the more confident I became." The audience smiled, some even taking notes. Mark continued, sharing his funniest mistakes. The time he said "I am exciting" instead of "I am excited," or when he accidentally asked for a good restaurant to eat instead of a good place to eat. People laughed, and Mark laughed with them. He no longer felt embarrassed, he felt proud. Every mistake had been a step toward fluency. "Learning English is not about being perfect," he said, looking around the room. "It's about being brave. It's about speaking even when you're scared. It's about taking every opportunity to learn, no matter how small." As he finished his speech, he saw Lucy smiling in the audience, her eyes full of pride. "And if I could do it, so can you," Mark said, his voice strong and confident. "The only question is, are you ready to start your journey?" The audience erupted in applause. Some people stood up, clapping and cheering. Mark felt a wave of emotion rush over him. He had done it. Not only had he learned English, but he had also inspired others to do the same. Later that night, Lucy hugged him. "Mark, that was incredible. You've become an inspiration." Mark smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you." She shook her head. "No, Mark. You did this. You made the decision to learn. You took the risk. And now look at you." Mark looked around, taking in the moment. He had faced his fears, embraced his mistakes, and transformed his life. As he walked home, he thought about his first day in New York, the fear, the doubt, the struggle. And then he thought about today, the confidence, the joy, the success. He had become the person he once dreamed of being. And he knew that this was just the beginning. Are you ready to start your English journey? Comment yes below if you believe in yourself. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more amazing stories. Stay with us for the next adventure on Immerse in English. What if the secret to speaking English fluently wasn't grammar or vocabulary, but storytelling? Join us in our next video, where we reveal how storytelling can train your brain to think in English naturally. Don't miss the next step in Leo's journey to fluency.